So I went ahead and got her all taped up. It's not perfect by any stretch of the means. I don't know how, but I got this huge air bubble in there, so I'm using this tape to try to keep it down and everything. But what I'm gonna end up doing is I'm gonna cut all of this right here into these swatches to make it to where it's long sweeping lines right there. So we're gonna cut right up in here, take away that plastic, then tape it down again, and then use newspaper just to make sure we don't have any overspray. And here, I'll go ahead and show you guys all the tape that I used. And just to be sure, you want to make sure you have a decent bit of tape. All right, so did all this side, everything like that, all around the back. Got the whole back glass, and then also everything on the side. What I was talking about where I was going to cut was I had these little marker lines right here. I don't know if you can see that right there, 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 and there again. And we're going to cut these long lines through that plastic. And then we're going to use our painter's tape again, go ahead and pull everything down over there, and then we're going to use our thinner tape that I've got there to make sure we get those nice straight lines and everything. So next what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use some of this sandpaper real quick. It's only 320 grit. You're supposed to use like 600, 800, and then 1200 for a finish. But for right now, I'm just going to scuff up the paint that's already on there so that the rattle can will actually stick to it properly and everything else with the poly and the clear cut and everything else. So I'll show you what it looks like after that. We're not going to take it down to bare metal. We're just going to scuff it. I know it doesn't really look like it, but got all this stuff sanded down. So the next thing we're going to do is clean off all this dust and whatnot with some mineral spirits, just to make sure it's a nice, clean, smooth surface. Normally I would also use glass cleaner, stuff like that. And then we're going to prime it for primer and everything else like that. Get a nice white base, and then on this stripe we're going to do red, and then we're going to do white, and then we're going to do blue. But first we need to tape down these edges all down along there. Make sure we get our newspaper. I already started right there. Newspaper on the side right there to make sure that the paint doesn't drip off onto the plastic and everything, and make it dribble down onto your work. Okay, now we got everything taped up like that. Got all the newspaper around it. Got some really nice clean edges so far. Got everything sanded, cleaned it up with mineral spirits. So now we're going to apply primer. We're going to hold it about 10 inches away, so right about here. I'm going to apply evenly back and forth strokes. Then I'm going to probably let it rest for about 10-15 minutes right around there. It's still kind of warm today. This metal's kind of warm, so it'll dry pretty quickly. I'm probably going to put on 2 to 3 coats, and then we're going to go to color. And after color, we're going to do the clear coat. So now we got a really nice even top coat layer, and there's a whole bunch of gnats that are trying to get on there. I'm sure you can see that. But yeah, look at that. Nice and crisp all the way through. I did about 2 layers, and now we're about to put on the first round of color. And then after that, we're going to put on a top coat glaze and everything else like that. Make sure it's all protected. It's kind of hard to show because it's a little bit later at night, but this is about as far away as you want to be, right? So you want to have a nice, real even kind of flow like that, so you go left to right. I like to do nice long strokes like that, so you apply really nice even color throughout the whole thing. You really don't want to go back over your coats on the initial one too much because it'll start to get runs. But from just right there, I mean, she comes out really well so far. I gotta touch up a little bit down there and whatnot, but that's what it should look after the first coat. Obviously the color pops more after the gloss and after your second coat and third coat, or however many you want to put on there. I usually go with 2 to 3 just to make sure I have nice even color throughout everything. Alright, so this is what it looked like the next day. After about 3 coats of paint. Looks pretty sharp there. Now we're about to go off and put some clear coat on there. I'm probably going to do 2 coats, and I'll show you what it looks like in both coats. And this is why we use that plastic. You see all that? All that nice little red mist that would have been all over the glass, all over the other paint, everywhere else. So make sure you go ahead and get that plastic done, because that is going to be extremely important to making sure that everything looks great. This is what it's going to look like after the first clear coat layer right there. So you see how it's a little splotchy everywhere. It's not going to look perfect on your first coat. It's going to really come out on your second one though. Kind of looks like a zebra. Kind of went over it and just started painting everything, but it'll get there. I kept it pretty tight on this last one. I did about a 3rd coat, so I took it right about here-ish and just like that. I like to keep it in sections, so I did it in 4 sections. Basically to the bottom all the way up to there. Bam, 2, 3, 4, all the way up. It still looks a little streaky. It's also very windy. I would highly recommend not doing this on a windy day. Yeah, you can kind of see all those streaks, so it's just got to still dry out and everything. Okay, so we went ahead and pulled off all the edges and stuff off camera, and it seems like it came out really well. It has some bumps that are on there, so we need to use some 2600 grit sandpaper, about 3200, to go ahead and clear all that out. You see those little bumps that are all over it? Just smooth out the paint and some other stuff like that. There was a little bit of chipping up here and whatnot. I don't know if that's because I'm not using the right kind of paint or anything like that, but besides that, it came out decently well. Basically, we're just going to repeat this process for the next 3 stripes I'm going to do right across it, and then I'll show you guys what the finished look came out to be and everything else like that. We're going to switch gears with the clear coat that we put over it. We're going to be putting this acrylic enamel over it. Unfortunately, the one that I used before was a satin. It's this one right here. The satin clear, right? And it didn't have that enamel on it. And that enamel is what makes that hard protective coat that goes over, and it creates a nice clear gloss. So for this white, and we're going to go back over the red too, and we're also going to use this Rust-Oleum here too. It's got the gloss cherry red. So we're going to try that instead, because that clear coat started to really come up off of that, just off painter's tape alone. So we're going to try out this enamel and this acrylic and everything else like that, and I'll show you how that's done and everything else. See, and this is why we're changing that clear coat. You see that? That big difference between that white and that red. So that was just from painter's tape alone. And then you can see it down there, all that started to get chipped up. Some spots all along there. That whole line is all just clear coat that got ripped off, and that was just from painter's tape. I mean, then think about what's going to happen with, rain, or if you just wash it, anything else like that. But this is that difference between that red and that white right there. And this still needs to be sanded down. It's still a little tacky, so I don't want to touch it too much, but it's still kind of like bubbly, everything like that. So I grabbed some 2000 grit sandpaper so we can go ahead and sand that, and I'll show you how to do all that stuff. So I tried out this Expert U-Pole stuff right here. I don't really like the coverage of this stuff very well. And also I tried their clear coat enamel. Was not really a big fan. So I ended up picking up the 1K clear stuff. Just this. So we're going to try this one out instead for the Duplicolor. When I did the clear coat on everything else, it seemed like it was more like a bed liner and it got really bumpy, but we just need to probably sand that out. But I'm going to redo everything with that 1K stuff that I have down there. But this is how the blue turned out so far. Not too bad. This is just a first coat and everything else. You can see the streaks and everything like from before with the red all throughout that. Kind of looks like a zebra again. So we're going to put on a second layer and then maybe even a third. But instead of using that U-Pole, we used just this Rust-Oleum again. It had better color, better coverage, and I think it was just the tip. So I'm not condemning U-Pole, but I would definitely go with the Rust-Oleum in my personal opinion. It's cheaper, has better coverage, and I like the tips. They're a lot more interchangeable, stuff like that. It has the angle grip, so I just go with that. I finished up with this 1K clear stuff right here because the other U-Pole stuff kind of cleared like a bed liner. It was kind of weird, didn't like it very much, so I grabbed that can. It was like 20 bucks from AutoZone, and that's how she came out. I think it came out pretty crisp and everything, really bright colors. I still have to sand it down with 2000 grit sandpaper and whatnot. And I just sprayed another clear coat on there, so it looks like a little runny here and there. But besides that, that should do it. Yeah. Go back through everything. First thing you want to do is just prep, and you make sure you get your plastic and everything down, and then get some newspaper, tape all that stuff down, make sure to tape your corners up really nice and everything else. Sand it, start with about a 300 grit sandpaper. I actually did 80 on some of it, but that 80 really just dug into the paint and everything else. So I'd start with like 300, pull it down, scuffle the paint to where that spray paint will actually go off and get in there and make everything stick very nicely. Next, you want to do a primer base. So your primer, do a white primer. Make sure you do about 2 coats. Let it sit for about 10 minutes in between each coat, 10 to 15 minutes. Then apply your first layer of color. So do a nice wide sweep for your first layer of color, and after that, do it in swatches. Do about 4 layers in each one. So do it into 4 parts, and then get your color nice and fast and evenly through it. Then after that, do about 2 layers of that, and then do your clear coat on there. I use that Duplicolor 1K clear. That was the best one that I found. After that, do 1 layer from far away. Do a nice brush like you were doing with your color, and then do it really close again. Do it about 4 to 5 inches. Get it really close like that, and make sure it just doesn't spread and does it evenly and everything else. After that, get a 2000 grit sandpaper, wet sand it. Make sure it gets all that nice bumpy stuff off of there. And then if you want, you can buff it as well. I've seen really good results from buffing and having gloss and everything on there. And then you can have the same results as this. I just did something small. I wouldn't really recommend doing a whole car in rattle can paint. This ran me about, I'd say, 175 bucks for everything, but that's because I went a little overboard with the clear coat. Got about 3 cans of that, so I just want to make sure it's going to last in the weather and everything else. But I hope this helped, and I'd love to see some of your guys' projects if you guys decide to use my advice for some stuff like this. But this is something small to help you guys out for a little do-it-yourself project. So.